All Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast with Nazca Fontes.
Good morning, listeners. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are joined by a remarkable woman who has helped create not one, but two families. First by being an egg donor and then by becoming a surrogate. You know, every Friday we have a weekly team meeting at Conceivabilities, and it's really an opportunity to come full circle after a full week of hard work and the trials and tribulations of what it takes to build families. And part of the glue for this team every Friday is to showcase, you know, maybe it's one birth of a child being born as a result of an egg donation or a surrogacy journey, but you know, maybe it's two, but really at the end of the week, it really is my favorite part of the week. And I dare say it's the team's favorite part of the week because we get to showcase exactly what goes into all of our hard work and the results that come out of it. So at the start of this meeting, our team shares these births, and over the course of the summer, we happened to share Maddie's story, and it really was such a heartwarming and beautiful story to share, and the team really enjoyed it. So Maddie, welcome. I'm glad we get an opportunity to showcase you a second time on this podcast. And before we get going, I just want to point out that you are a mom of five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And not only did you graciously make time to be an egg donor, but to also be a surrogate, and now to share your story with our audience. So welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Let's start off with a little background about you. I gave our listeners a little bit of a glimpse, but why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
I am a mother of 5. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've kind of lived all over the country with my husband and his job as they've transferred us around everywhere. And it was a little difficult trying to arrange this with 5 kiddos and then me not figuring out Mountain Standard Time. But I'm glad that we're able to do this. I come from a large family. My husband comes from a large family as well. So I come from a family of 9, as does he. And we just always knew we wanted kiddos, and luckily that was a very easy thing for me to do.
So each from a family of 5, of 9 rather. So 5 kids actually doesn't sound like a lot in comparison.
No.
So to the rest of us, we are, so surprised to hear that number in today's day and age. But for both of you, you come from large families. So 5 was something that you thought, hey, completely doable, right?
Right. Well, and most everyone around us only has the typical 2 or 3. Nobody just told us that we could stop. So we just kept going. And I'm glad that we did. I have 3 boys, and then we got our little girl. So we were completely finished with our perfect little family. And then my last decided to sneak in there unexpected. And we're sure glad he did, because he's pretty much rules our house. He's the best one. So
I love that. So, now that you've had this experience of having kids, what does it mean to you to be able to help others build a family who are struggling?
It means a lot to me, just because we had kind of a non-typical way to start our family as well. My husband and I were engaged, but we were not married, and we both come from pretty religious families. And then I got pregnant before my husband and I got married, and it was a really big surprise for everyone involved. And it was kind of a difficult time of life, I would say. I think that, looking back on it now, I wouldn't change a thing about it, but going through it at the time was very difficult. And pregnancy was something that, people in my family were ashamed that I was doing, that I would, for one, maybe keep the baby or not put the baby up for adoption, different things like that. We were very surprised how people reacted to us. So it wasn't a very happy thing until many months later when my son was born and they saw, actually, they're fantastic parents. Because I was only 21 when I had my first son. My husband was a bit older. And so pregnancy kind of carried with it, it wasn't necessarily like a negative connotation. It just wasn't a, like the big celebration, the big gender reveal, the happy thing. And so when we had the 4 other children, it obviously was a much easier process telling everyone that we were pregnant. But it kind of always had this shadow that hung over it. And so I think one of the main reasons I wanted to help others have children and be able to enjoy in this was because I wanted to, 'cause for us anyways, it was always a celebration of life that we were able to bring, these children into the world. And maybe it was unfortunate for others that it was so easy for me to be able to do that. But to be able to help somebody else who that it was such a difficult and a disappointing thing to not be pregnant was kind of where I feel like that seed sort of started to grow for me, because it was a trial I had to go through to deal with other people, and I was able to help other people and show this 100% is a blessing and something to be celebrated and something to be happy about. And so first starting with egg donation, was it was a blessing to be able to do that. But I also felt like I only got to see the beginning of that, right? So actually now sitting on the other side of surrogacy, where I was able to be more involved and able to see, the weekly updates of the little man that I helped grow, has just completely 180'd the whole experience from the very beginning, 17 years ago, when pregnancy was such a sad part for some of us around me. And now it's completely 180'd.
What a unique and fascinating, interesting story, really, Maddie. Like I did not know this going into the podcast about you, and it's very unique to hear a story where, the origin of your journey and your inspiration to help build families is actually rooted in a story that's not so happy, right? And so to connect that, those early moments in your first pregnancy to wanting to help others and inspire joy is truly unique and really sets you apart in that regard. So thank you for sharing that with our listeners. And I wonder, when you were thinking about the concept of egg donation, which you did first before becoming a surrogate, maybe help me understand a little bit how you first became aware of egg donation and how you did kind of tie it back to those early days with your first pregnancy, and then the motivation to kind of, take that next step and click submit on an application.
Right. So I didn't just, pull it out of thin air. I have a best friend who we met when we were 3. She lived right across the street from me, and we were actually roommates in college when I got pregnant with my first. And she, understandably so, me and my fiance were kind of freaking out about it. And she was the first person I told. And she was the first person who said how exciting it was going to be that I was going to be able to have a baby. And so she helped me, see the joy in it. She actually got married the day I gave birth to my first baby. So I missed out on being her maid of honor in 9 months pregnant in August. I was kind of okay with not having to wear my tulle filled my bridesmaid's dress, but that's another story. But she actually, so I started having a family right away. She was married for a few years. I had another child, and then I got pregnant with my third, and she started to look into, they wanted to start a family as well. I was on child number 3. She wanted to start, and she couldn't. And it took her months and months of trying. I actually got pregnant with my third when they'd been trying for a while. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but then she told me, and then I delivered, and she still hadn't. And then they ended up going the route of an egg donor, because they found out that she had an issue where she couldn't get pregnant with what she had. And so I didn't even know that it was a thing, and she didn't get one from me. She didn't, and from anyone that she knew. But I just thought, what an incredible thing and option to be able to have. And then she was able to give birth to her first, and she's had subsequently 2 more kiddos since then. So I was able to see what a beautiful thing it was for her, and that's kind of what planted the seed to we going and looking into conceivabilities.
And so when you decided to be an egg donor and you went through the process, can you identify for us, what was the most rewarding part of that for you? Because egg donation is not easy. I mean, certainly pregnancy and delivery isn't either, but egg donation is very unique, and there is not, as you mentioned earlier, kind of this ongoing process of, significant milestones and rewards along the way. It's kind of it's a condensed, shortened time frame, but it's challenging. So for you, what was the most rewarding part of that?
I guess what I would say the most rewarding part of that was being able to go to Chicago. I'd never been there before. And then being in the clinic waiting for the actual egg retrieval. You sit in a waiting room and you're able to look around, and there's people just all different stages in there, and you don't know any of their stories, like they don't know yours. But you can imagine that there's, people in there who are wanting to start a family, or people who are helping others start families, and you're all connected from the same desire to want to make more children. And so you can picture and imagine that maybe, something that it was difficult, but it wasn't. I had already had 3 kids, and so going, getting your blood taken, going to doctor's visits, going for ultrasounds was really not that big of a deal, considering that you were going to be able to produce life from things that they were taking, So it was difficult, but it wasn't if you kept the big picture in, because you knew that you'd be able to help somebody start a family, and start a family that they wanted so desperately that they were willing to put in the hard work. They were putting in much harder work than I was at least from my perspective. Anything that I needed to do didn't seem that difficult. The reward was far greater.
So what's interesting is most women who are donors have not had children yet. They haven't had their own families yet. And egg donation, can oftentimes lead to surrogacy along the way, particularly if a donor has done an egg donation, she goes off, she has her own family, and she returns later. But you did it a little bit differently. So what was it about egg donation? And maybe it was the story of your best friend having to utilize the assistance of an egg donor that really was the catalyst for you. But what was it that made you decide that you wanted to pursue egg donation as opposed to surrogacy first?
I didn't even see surrogacy on the horizon. I had 3 kids, and I didn't know if I wanted any more. And so egg donation just seemed like something that, it obviously was not difficult for me to grow children. And so I thought that if I could help in that way, it would be, I wouldn't say easy, but it would be beneficial to everybody involved, because I knew that my eggs could, grow children. And yeah, just the thought of not being able to have a child when you wanted it, it was crushing to me, because I love being a mom. It is my favorite thing in my life. And so the thought that somebody, might be told a part of you is not going to be able to make that, just made it seem like, it's something I get rid of once a month. Why couldn't I help somebody out in the way? Yeah,
and then
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that is a typical motivation for egg donors. So you're not alone in that regard. But I'm still curious, what was it then after you completed your egg donation that kind of sat within you, right? There must have been this kernel of something that began, a seed that began to grow, where you thought, maybe I'm going to look a little bit closer at the idea of surrogacy. Tell us about that.
So I was an egg donor back in 2014, maybe. And then, we lived in Ohio. It seemed like a whole different world. So then I did that. I was happy with that. I felt like we had done what we set out to do. And then I had 2 more children after that. Like I said, a surprised 5th child, but he's wonderful. And it actually wasn't until I got an email from Conceivabilities that I was reading to my husband, and it had mentioned surrogacy, and I read it out loud to my husband, and he, I laughed about it, and I was like, my youngest was 4 at the time, and I was like, hey, how would you feel about me being pregnant again? And he laughed and said, well, whose would it be? Because, he cannot have children any longer after our surprise number 5. And then I read him the email, and, I kind of laughed it off a little. We had talked, years ago about possibly doing surrogacy for my sister. And so she ended up not having any more children. But, we had thought about it, just in like passing. And then, I brought it back up to him when I got the email from Conceivabilities, and I kind of laughed it off. And he was the one that was more like, just imagine though, like you could change an entire generation of somebody's life. Like you wouldn't just be changing your life or the family's life who has the baby. He's like, you'd be having, a child, and then they could have a family, and they could have a family. Think of all the lives you could change. So, he's more one that planted the seed in that aspect, where then I just thought about it and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I emailed Conceivabilities back just as, a little, let's just find out a little bit more information about this. This is kind of a little bit more of a commitment than, a couple of months giving of egg donation. And then once I started and I had my initial consultation, it just kind of snowballed very quickly from there. And I always had a good feeling about it. Like I knew it was what I was supposed to do.
So tell us a little bit more then about your husband. I love his initial response. Very cheeky, very funny.
Yeah.
What good humor about it all. But, tell me a little bit more about his role during this process, because he seemed to be receptive from, the early stages of this consideration, right? Considering the idea of surrogacy. But how would you define his role during the journey?
Oh gosh, my husband, he's wonderful. And when people would ask, how supportive is your husband of this? And then I would tell him, well, you know what? He was kind of the biggest cheerleader. He was kind of my biggest motivation. My husband is a big man. He's 6'4", he's a big, broad man, and he loves babies. He probably would have had more children if it weren't for me. He loves being a dad, and he's just this big guy with this big mushy heart. He cries at, dog commercials, and he's wonderful. So, if you think about it, he was kind of more for it than I was, which I guess is a testament to me. He didn't obviously see an issue with having to deal with me being pregnant for 10 months, which I can see is, not the funnest thing, I would think, for most husbands. But he's a very big picture type guy where he could see that it was going to be, really productive forever. So he was my biggest cheerleader. He has no issues scheduling the appointments. He always is a glass half full kind of guy. So when we have to fly out for the, the medical workup, he's like, how wonderful. We've never been to Connecticut. How wonderful. We get to go meet these people. We get to go see all these different things. There was always something really positive about it, even during, probably the most difficult part, the medications. He does not deal well with shots or blood or any of that stuff, and he hyped himself up. He learned how to do the shots from our neighbor who's a nurse, and he did every single one of them for me. He is as much to congratulate about all of this as I am, because he was my biggest support the entire way. I wouldn't have been able to do it without him.
I could not agree with that more about the husbands. We have a term that we love to call them the men behind surrogacy. And it's so true. And the husbands or partners of surrogates just share this commonality amongst them. They are cheerleaders. They are, as you say, the glass half full kind of optimistic folks out there. I mean, and you really have to be, because it's not an easy process, as you know, right? Of course. So they are a surrogate's biggest champion and advocate in the process. So it's not uncommon. The husbands and partners play a huge role in the success of a journey. And so,
Yeah, I
how
would
about
agree.
your kids? Your kids are older. They clearly understood what was going on. Tell me about that conversation, both from, introducing the idea of surrogacy to them, and then along the way, how, the journey unfolded for them as well. I'd love to hear more of that.
They were great. Like you said, my oldest is 15 and my youngest just turned 5. So we kind of had to explain it to all of them how my 5-year-old would understand. And we just explained, there's a mom out there who wants to have kids just like we do. You like having brothers and sisters, and we love having a family, and they want to do that too. But the intended parents that we worked with, the mom had gotten sick, and so she wasn't able to have children. And I just explained to them that her body wouldn't let him grow it, but my body does. And so mom was going to just take, a year out of her life and grow this baby for them so that they could have it forever. And my 5-year-old, he was like, that's great. He thought it was wonderful. He thought it was so fun that we could, pull up on my phone and show him how big the baby was. He thought it was so funny that the baby was the size of a blueberry. And, he doesn't remember what it was like for me to be pregnant with the other ones. My oldest obviously does. And he was really supportive. He was really excited that the baby wasn't coming home with us, because he does remember what it's like to add more siblings. So he was actually, super understanding, super glad that we weren't having more. But they understood it. And I overheard my daughter explaining it to her friend one time, and she said it just like that. My mom's growing a baby because the baby's mom got sick and can't. That's just what it was. And I don't think they saw anything abnormal about it, just because it was always just what we were going to do. And they were okay with it.
Out of the mouths of babes, right? Just so
Right.
pragmatic and logical and no nonsense. And this is the way it is. I love that. I just love that about kids.
Yeah.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk about your intended parents. You've mentioned them now a few times. And, for us, matching is so important. That is really a hallmark of our program. And for our surrogate community, it is the top priority, who they get matched with. So tell us a little bit about your match and how it felt to match with the family that you were meant to help.
I have got to give Conceivabilities props, because everybody says, they're wonderful at matching. They're wonderful. And I always figured, sure, right. Like, they'll match me with somebody who wants a baby, and that'll be it, and that'll be great. And then when you read the profile of the people that Conceivability sends you, and you just read it, and then you just sob, then you just know, okay, these people are my people. And then you meet them and you talk to them, and they're wonderful. And then you fly across the country and you have dinner with them, and you sit and you talk for 4 hours until the attendants at the restaurant politely ask us to leave because they've closed. You just realize how wonderful the matching process actually is. I am friends with these people. They are family to me now, but I would, if none of this, surrogacy had tied us together, I would be friends with these people. I would hang out with them on the weekends. I would want to watch their children grow up anyways. So they matched us with the most perfect couple for us. Like I said, the mother had, she found out that she had a brain tumor, actually, when they started to want to have children. And so they had to do surgery on that, take care of that. And then they just mentioned to her that, any sort of hormone inducing action in her life could cause the tumor to grow more. And so children was just not a thing that they were going to be able to do. She had to do chemo, she had to do radiation. So they were able to, gather her eggs before they did all of that. And then she went through a really difficult time trying to get herself healthy again. They told her she may never walk again. And she ran a marathon. She's incredible. She's a nurse. She takes care of people. And she wanted to have a family. So we could not have been matched with a more humble, kind couple. And my goodness, conceivabilities just outdid themselves. It was an honor.
Certainly, how much I love to hear that, but it's, we take a lot of pride in that process, and it's been, a process that's been honed over, our history, our 27-year history. So it's really important to us, and stories like this just make all that hard work worth it. Now, what about, you said that these are people that you would like anyway, and you would be friends with them anyway. So now kind of on the other side of the journey, now that it's complete, tell us a little bit about your ongoing relationship with them.
I talk to them often, and they are constantly sending picture updates. And I'm sure as baby gets a little bit older, won't be as often. But during the surrogacy and the 3 months hence, it's just like having a friend still. It's, something happens and I want to talk to them. And I'm, big milestones are happening over there, and they want to share it with me, at least for now. And so it's been, I feel like the fun aunt that's able to still participate. And so, it's a friendship and it's a love, and I love those people. They'll always be a part of my family.
A friendship and a love. Perfectly stated. Now, leading up to the birth, obviously it was a journey for you, and lots of milestones, and as you say, injections and appointments and flights and, all the kind of administrative and medical aspects of the process. But what for you, kind of looking back at looking in your rearview mirror and looking back on it, can you identify something that you can say is, now that was the most rewarding part of this entire process?
Oh, there's so many. I can tell you what the best moment was of the entire process. And like I said, they live on the other side of the country from me, and I kind of went into labor a little bit earlier than I thought, probably a little bit quicker than I should have. And so I called them as soon as I knew I was in active labor, and they tried to get on a flight and they couldn't until later on that evening. And so we were initially pretty disappointed that they were going to miss the birth. But anybody that knows that they have a delivery, you've got the nurses, you've got the doctor, you've got the people that come in to check the baby. They're checking, all the reflexes, the heart rate. They're putting the goop in the eyes. It's kind of a chaotic moment during the labor. And then they gave him back to us. We watched him for a few hours. The parents finally made it into town around 3 a.m. And so when they came into the room, it was just myself, my husband, the mom, the dad, and then the little guy. And so it was incredible just to be able, it was just us four. And I know that, hundreds of people went into making it so that this could happen, but it was just the root. It was just the four of us. It was a quiet, peaceful, beautiful moment to be able to hand this woman who I love now, her son, for the first time. You just can't beat it. It's like nailing the Christmas gift, but like times 100, and it will go down as being one of the best moments of my entire life.
That is exceptionally beautiful. I love how you just have the best terms. That was the root. The four of you and the little guy, the root of the entire thing, the entire journey. And I love, too, how you kind of, gave us this glimpse of how it was just a peaceful, calm, beautiful moment, as opposed to, yes, the chaos of the moment of birth and all of the medical professionals bustling around. And that's, overwhelmingly how a surrogacy journey kind of reaches its pinnacle, right? The moment of birth.
Right.
It is that chaotic scene. But this this had a specialness, a quietness to it, and a beauty that really is unrivaled. So I love that you gave us that illustration. What a moment. What a moment indeed. How would you say, having given birth now 6 times, was the recovery different than recovering with your own babies? Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I could just sleep makes the world of a difference. And when you don't have the newborn at home and you actually can just get in your bed and sleep, it is night and day. So it was much easier to recover without the baby. I love him, and I was so grateful that I was able to have him, but I was also so grateful that he did not come home with me and that I could just go home to my bed and to my children. When we were in the hospital, my kids came to see me, and the nurse who was checking me out told my children, take care of your mom. She needs to be taken care of still. And my 5-year-old took that to heart. He did not leave my side for days, and he just cuddled up with me in bed. And he helped refill my water, and he made sure that I had everything that I needed. And it was special, and it was lovely to be able to recover, because it's a medical thing that happens, and so you're trying to recover. The only difficult part, I would say, that was different from having your own is I felt during recovery almost lazy. Just because when you have a baby, you're doing so much, you're exhausted, you don't care that you're laying in bed all day, right? When you're recovering without the baby, I almost felt like I was like, oh, I need to be up, but then I couldn't be up. You have to rest after you've had a baby. But because I wasn't taking care of anything else but myself, I think maybe that was the hardest part, is to tell myself, no, you need to recover. Lay, relax, enjoy yourself. You've earned this, without feeling guilty for just laying and relaxing and enjoying it.
It's so hard for us women and mothers,
right.
Isn't it? Like, the idea of just convalescence is so foreign to us. We're not afforded that luxury, but we do need to listen to our bodies. I mean, most, especially after giving birth. So, your tale is not unusual there, but it is a different type of recovery for sure. I'd say one thing that doesn't get discussed a lot, but I know there's so much interest surrounding it, is the actual, moment where the distance gets created, right? You get discharged from the hospital, you go home to your family and recover, and the intended parents, pack up, and there's hugs and tears and all kinds of goodbyes, but why don't you talk a little bit about the actual separation and what that feels like, what it's like to go through?
So I was only in the hospital. I gave birth, Saturday night. They released me Sunday morning, and they stayed with their baby. And that was a little bit jarring, I think. Just to, you'd been with the baby for so long, and then you leave him. I didn't ever worry that he wasn't in good hands, and I was so grateful that he was with his parents where he was supposed to be. But it was a little jarring getting in the car, as you do the wobble out with your giant. It wasn't going to get anything reversed, but he was very good to point things out. Like, you wouldn't be able to be going to this concert right now if you had a newborn in tow. And I was like, you're right. I have gotten used to having life with grown or, older children. So
Indeed.
A fleeting moment.
A fleeting moment. Now, I always love to ask this because it's, it's not a taboo subject per se, but it's a sensitive one, and that is the compensation. But it always is a question mark. It's a question mark for people that don't know much about surrogacy. It's a question mark for those who are considering surrogacy. It certainly is a factor in the process, not the decision making, of course, but the process. So I'd love to ask you, when you look at the financial aspect and the compensation associated with surrogacy, what is it that you thought about, and how did you earmark that compensation for you and your family?
So the compensation, I feel like, is important just because of how much you're going through and how much it does change your life. What we were, we'll have a lot of people that ask us, like, what are you going to do? Or they refer to it as like selling a kidney, the same type of thing, where we didn't see it like that. We saw it. I'm married to an accountant, so money is very, I don't know how to put it. My husband is stingy in the best possible way. He, saves for a rainy day, for like a hurricane. But we have 5 children, and that's a lot of kids. And education is important to us. We are raising a whole bunch of nerds, and we talked from the very beginning when we found out about the compensation about how it would divide up amongst 5 children very easily. And, we could put it towards their college educations or their, what they would like to do with their lives once they graduate to further stimulate their minds. And that's what we did. We took it and we put it in their student investment funds that we were able to trickle to, once a month with our 5 children. But this was able to help, my kids in the long run. And we always thought that was kind of the cherry on top of the sundae. It wasn't the motivating factor, but it was definitely something that added just a little bit more to the whole process that would help further our children and be beneficial to them, because they had to deal with a mom, who was tired at the beginning and who couldn't always do everything with them that they wanted to do. I couldn't go down the water slides during the summer, 9 months pregnant. But when they're older, they'll be able to see, this was a really good thing, and then that it's also benefited us individually as well.
It benefited everybody, right? I love that you kind of equally divided that up for their future. As a lot of surrogates do, right? It really just becomes this sort of nest egg issue that kind of just looms in the background. It's not a necessity. It's like this sense of satisfaction and comfort that gets placed in the background. Yeah. Now, when we think about some, maybe this is tied to the notion of misconceptions, because I get asked, I can't tell you how often throughout my, decades-long career, are surrogates and donors motivated by the money? I'm like, that is such a myth. It's just a myth. And there's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there. And so if you kind of think about your own experience and some of the questions that you have had to field along the way, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions about both egg donation and surrogacy that people have?
I think, a lot of people would say things like, especially, egg donation. I had a lot of people say, like, how could you have, part of you just out there in the world not knowing what's going on? Or, I had quite a few people with surrogacy say things like, oh gosh, the things that people would say, like, how can you give away this child that you've grown? And, I got a lot of, oh, well, yeah, if they paid me to give me a kidney, I'd do it too. And it's just such an afterthought, I think, for at least in my situation, that you have to look at the big picture of what's actually happening, field for that. Because I don't think that's, you can't put a price on the things that you're doing. And so when you'd have people, thinking that you're doing it all for the money, I wish you could, give them a glimpse of the joy that you're able to feel when you're able to give the mom the child. And then you'd know there's no reason in the world that you would do this for money. It's just such an afterthought, I guess. It's something that I don't know how to explain. It just was not the leading factor, and it was not the focal point. It was the ultrasounds and being able to show the mom, their baby's heartbeat for the first time. Or those were the rewards during the treatment, during the surrogacy. And the money just was such an afterthought. It didn't have anything to do with the big picture.
No, it didn't. And you've referred now a couple times to the big picture, like the ability both for you and your husband to kind of zoom way out and see this process, whether it's egg donation or surrogacy, for truly the impact that it was going to have for generations to come, and see the much bigger picture there. And I do think that there is such an intellectual capability amongst surrogates and donors to really have that ability to zoom out. And it's a remarkable one, and it's a very logical one.
And my husband said, he said, it completely changed the lives of the parents we're able to do this for. And a year out of my life to change somebody else's entire life, like, that's nothing.
Do you think it was easy for you to explain, maybe your mother or to others, that this wasn't your baby, this was the embryo that was created from somebody else that you carried? And I think that's another misconception, right? People think that surrogates are using their own eggs and they're giving away their own children, essentially.
Right. And I would tell her, I'm just the oven. They have made it, and I am just growing it for them because it's what my body is great at. And most people understood that. My parents, they're a little bit old school, so it took them a long time to understand it. My dad kept asking if he could up his grandkid count with it, but they eventually got there. They eventually understood, this is their child. They've done a lot to get him here, and I literally just cooked him for him. So
So when we think about both egg donation and surrogacy, Maddie, what would you tell someone if they said, I've heard about this idea of egg donation, I'm going to look into it more? What would you say to them about why a woman should consider possibly becoming an egg donor?
I would tell them, please look into it. And if it's something that you can do that wouldn't, it wouldn't be too difficult on your part, and it could benefit, not just one couple. Egg donation can benefit quite a few. And think about, everything that they've already been through to try and go and have a family. And it's, what your little part is such a, big part of their story. And it truly is something that, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. It's not for me, at least. You said that a lot of people do it who have not had children, and so maybe that's where it differs for me, where I didn't feel like it was that difficult of a process. Having babies is a lot harder. So egg donation is something that's relatively easy that can make a large impact on someone else's life. And then,
and would you say the same thing about surrogacy? Like, why should someone consider becoming a surrogate?
Oh, goodness. There's so many reasons. I look back on it now and I can't believe that it's already over. I know, during the thick of it, during the shots, the progesterone, that was, whew. But it's such a little moment for such a high reward that I don't know how anyone wouldn't consider doing it. If you're able to have children fairly easy, if your body tolerates it, if your mind tolerates it, and your husband, it's such a rewarding thing that I don't think that too many people are able to experience it, and I'm sad for that. I wish that they could experience it because it's such a I almost feel like it was just as much a reward for myself as it was for the family. I got to have all of the good parts without having to lose any sleep at night. So it's something that has changed my life forever, and I would recommend it to anybody who's able, because of how beneficial it has been in my life. I think it's really important. Of course, all about self-service and doing things for ourselves that benefit us, but the ability to try and put us on the back burner and allow us to see other people, to be able to help them out, really does in turn make you feel better about yourself. So it's just like a happy little circle. So if you're ever going through something and you need a boost to your life, I would recommend surrogacy, because I just smile. It's just something that has brought me so much joy in my life. I can't imagine not doing it and not being able to just be proud. Just be proud of what, my family and I did, and being able to get those pictures. It is like Christmas morning every time I open my phone and I see that it's from my intended mom, and it's that little smiling man. There is nothing greater in the world. So
I love that. It's so beautiful. It really is the ultimate act of giving back to the world.
yeah, I've been very lucky in my life, and I feel like if I can help out even a little bit, why wouldn't I? Why not?
And we could all use these kinds of stories right now, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at the world as a whole, it seems kind of very, desolate. Bad things are happening. But if you look and see how in your own personal life, how you can benefit somebody else, even if you think it's just, a little way, if we all did that, imagine what an impact it could have to make the world a better
Indeed.
place.
That's right. So, Maddie, tell me a little bit more about you donating your milk to a milk bank. I'd love to hear how you first got connected to the idea and maybe how long you might have done that for.
So Conceivabilities has a Facebook page that they have everybody become a member of if you're on Facebook. And somebody had posted about, if parents don't want milk but if you would like to donate, here's the information. I was recommended by my OBGYN to try and pump at least for a few weeks after delivery just to, pull everything back together, they said, where I had breastfed all 5 of my children. I hadn't pumped a lot, but I had pumped some. So I was, vaguely familiar with the process, so I didn't think that it would be too bad. And I started doing that. Because all of the milk goes to premature babies, and they send the milk out throughout all the country to the different hospitals, to the different NICUs where the babies are, and they dehydrate your milk and then they send it out that way. And it's really great that the milk is able to go and help support, because a lot of the preemie babies, they say, can't tolerate formula. They can only have breast milk, so they're able to benefit from that.
It's such an important endeavor. We have been spearheading our own milk bank challenge to, get 1 million ounces of breast milk donated. I mean, that's a lot of breast milk over the course of the last, year and a half. And what people maybe don't realize is just 1 ounce of breast milk is a full meal for, our tiniest premature infants in the NICU. And so it's so important. I mean, think of how many babies get fed from the generosity of women who donate their breast milk.
Right.
Really,
and I mean,
really important.
I've been doing it now 3 months, and I just pulled up the log that they send you with, and I've been able to donate 4,010 ounces of milk so far. So human bodies are incredible. Aren't they incredible?
They are. They are indeed. Well, you're certainly incredible, Maddie, in your story, and everything that you shared with me and our listeners today is just remarkable, and it's just a reflection of the kind of heart and soul that surrogates are possessed with. So thank you so much for sharing with us today about your journey, both as a donor, a surrogate, a mom, a wife. And we really, really thank you for everything that you've done on behalf of growing families.
Of course. It was my pleasure. It was nice to get to talk to you. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, another remarkable surrogacy and egg donor story for the books. I mean, Maddie was just simply terrific. And in reflection of the conversation that we just had, I always love to have an aha moment where I step away and I think about what I've learned too, or what I connect with the most during these conversations. And for this one in particular, it was just the understanding that, as human beings, we are just on a rock, hurtling through space and the cosmos, and all the things that we tend to get wrapped up in day to day that we think matter so much really don't matter at all. And it's our ability to zoom out and to really think about the big picture and our place in the universe, and how our simple acts of love, compassion, support, helpfulness are the things that matter most when it's all said and done. So for those who really want to think about ways to give back, to show some compassion, to show support, and to reach out to our fellow human beings, think of the small and large ways, whether it's surrogacy or something not so big and grand in the world, that you can connect and give back, and let all of the other things that are really just so small and meaningless slide away. They just don't matter. Just imagine the big picture and looking down on the world and figuring out how you can contribute. So listeners, thank you today for joining me and joining Maddie and talking about all things conceivable. Until next time, take care.
At Conceivabilities, we believe that everyone who wants to become a parent can. Our agency has helped build thousands of families for nearly 25 years. Whether you are an intended parent ready to fulfill your family destiny, a surrogate answering your calling, or an egg donor wanting to expand what's possible in your life, we are your people. See how matching matters. Learn more by joining our Surrogacy Learning Center community at surrogacylearningcenter.conceivabilities.com.